face it, no year is ever a pretty one, but 2018 was definitely a heavy hitter in terms of loss. Half the MCU was wiped out, we were forced to say goodbye to big-time legends like Stan Lee. Trust me, it's not a happy list. Among those tragic losses was the bankruptcy of digital gaming giant Telltale Games. Just when it felt like they were finally on top of the world, they ended up collapsing under the weight of their own poor business practices. Today, we're here to honor the memories they gave us by looking at the sad, disorienting story of the company that kept story-based adventure games alive.
With all the general malice I have to get done in a day, girls are just a huge waste of time.
I have never been as turned on as I am right now.
To really get a grasp on Telltale's history, we first need to take a look at a gaming company that's now more machine than man. LucasArts.
Named after a certain office rocker Star Wars creator, one of LucasArts' claim to fame was the point-and-click adventure game genre, which thrived on narrative-driven gameplay mixed in with some challenging puzzles. Over its tenure, it ended up spawning some of the most iconic cult classics of the genre, including Maniac Mansion, the Monkey Island series, Sam & Max Hit the Road, Full Throttle, and Grim Fandango. While they had a few sequels planned for Full Throttle and Sam & Max, both sequels are canceled due to current marketplace realities and underlying economic considerations. In other words, they weren't Star Wars, but as sad as it sounds, people just weren't into the point-and-click genre as they had hoped. So it was time to move with the tides and let the genre go peacefully. But in late 2004, a trio of former LucasArts employees decided they'd make their own LucasArts!
With blackjack and hookers!
They banded together to form their own gaming company called Telltale Games, which would specialize in adventure gaming. So naturally, their first release would be a poker game called Telltale Texas Hold'em.
Haha! See? That wasn't just a cheat meme! This time.
But soon enough, they managed to get their footing with the point-and-click genre they promised to bring life back into, with titles such as Tales of Monkey Island, Strong Bad's Cool Game for Attractive People, 3 seasons of Sam & Max, and one of my personal favorites, the Poker Night games. While their titles didn't exactly revolutionize the industry, they were still met with critical praise for their fun gameplay and entertaining narratives. The fact that almost all their games were released episodically meant there was always plenty to offer. Aside from the aforementioned Texas Hold'em poker game, almost all of Telltale's titles were licensed, either based solely on comics, webtoons, other games, or a collection of all that brought together for a little guy's night out. While some could probably view that as glorified playable fanfiction, others see it as breaking the walls of that old stereotype about licensed games not being what they're cracked up to be.
It also helped that they weren't afraid to make fun of themselves when they needed to. Heck, Strong Bad had an entire frickin' documentary made about him hating his own game.
You said that point and click meant pointing a gun and clicking the trigger! You guys are the ugliest scrubs I've ever seen!
However, there was still the issue of their best games being based on more niche subjects. Sad to say that it's hard to find anyone who's even heard of Sam & Max or Monkey Island unless you were an uber geek. However, that all changed when they managed to catch the eyes of bigger, more renowned licensed franchises, including Back to the Future, Fables, Batman, another personal favorite, Borderlands, Minecraft.
The fact that they managed to make a story out of Minecraft without using creepypastas still astounds me. Even more so that they made it streamable on Netflix.
And of course, the series that really put Telltale on the map, The Walking Dead. From then on, Telltale shifted from comedic, self-aware games to a more serious tone, one that focused solely on character development, narrative progression, and being forced to make difficult decisions that could alter the course of the story and relationships with other characters. After a rather niche start, it seemed that Telltale had finally found their calling. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for them to begin a slow stumble towards the finish line.
Nebula, no! Stand down!
Face it, such a major change in the status quo of your company doesn't come without a few hiccups. With the success of The Walking Dead, Telltale found a game formula that seemed to work for them, one based more on story than on brain-tickling puzzles. On the one hand, this can be good because you don't end up frustrated when you're stuck in a minigame or with a severe headache trying to solve all these puzzles.
Puzzles. So many puzzles.
On the other hand, part of the genre's charm is being able to use your brain, little hints in the background, and handy unconventional items to progress your way through an adventure, giving you a further sense of accomplishment when you figure something out. Adding to it, almost all of Telltale's later titles have a fixation with QuickTime events, and there was a noticeable decrease in actual pointing and clicking. Thankfully, it was still there, it just became less important as the years went by.
Kind of embarrassing when you take the point and click out of a point and click adventure game.
You take the venom out of a cobra and what do you got? You got a
a belt.
At first, these were more like little nitpicks that, in hindsight, don't really matter. The little gaming company that could had blossomed into a gaming giant, and it seemed like their success was never going to end, and nothing could possibly go wrong.
Oh no, it all went wrong!
Yeah, over the next few years, fans really started to notice a dip in quality with some of their games. While some reached critical acclaim like The Wolf Among Us, Tales of the Borderlands, Batman's second season, and Minecraft Story Mode Season 1, others like the Guardians of the Galaxy barely even grabbed anyone. A lot of it had to do with how they chose to recycle the same writing style, trying to recapture the same magic that made Season 1 of The Walking Dead a success with its more dark, dramatic writing. They even tried to make the Minecraft game, freaking Minecraft, more mature and aimed more for teens and young adults. Thankfully, they decided against it, and the game became a smash hit.
You'd think that'd be an eye-opener for the company, that they didn't have to keep making the same game over and over and over and over and over. But
I didn't learn anything!
Speaking of The Walking Dead, while Season 1 blew expectations out of the water, the following seasons and spin-offs couldn't quite reach that same peak in quality. Not necessarily that they were bad, just not as great. It's really hard to recreate the charm of the budding father-daughter relationship between Lee and Clementine. And as time went on, the choices didn't seem to matter as much. That, and it's hard to get invested with any of the new guys in the New Frontier.
Kate's gonna leave you. What? She told me so.
Honey!
You said that?
Jesus fucking Christ, no!
that escalated quickly.
It's really sad because Telltale used to be all about taking risks with even their funniest titles, trying stuff that was new and absurd and either striking gold or brushing their less than great performances off and moving on. But after a while, they decided to just play it safe with what they assumed their audience loved, and it usually backfired and failed to secure a decent enough profit. Just because something works for one title doesn't mean it's going to work for all of them.
Money, 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 money! Robot God!
I'll keep this short as this really isn't a contributing factor to Telltale's decline, but more of a symptom. And it's especially sad for those that have supported Telltale since the beginning. In a 2017 interview, when asked about potential sequels, Telltale confirmed that while they had planned second seasons for their more modern titles like The Wolf Among Us or Game of Thrones, they would not be returning to their earlier titles such as Monkey Island or Sam & Max, because according to them, both are an important part of the company's history, but not its future.
Ouch! I didn't think I still had feelings, but there they are.
Again, not really a contributing factor to Telltale's demise. Plus, unless your name is Nintendo or Disney, you can't really depend on nostalgia forever. But the way it's said seems kind of hurtful, considering it was Sam & Max that inspired them to even start their company. And it sounds vaguely familiar, doesn't it? It almost sounds like what LucasArts said when they wanted to stop making adventure games.
Wait a minute. Didn't LucasArts do something like that? I believe they did. Congratulations, Telltale. You became that which you sought to outdo.
The Ping Zhao people settle land disputes with that kind of eye contact. But I don't think that's what you're doing.
While reception for Telltale's titles were off the walls, things behind the scenes were even more of a mess. What was once a small, up-and-coming company had grown into a massive organization with over 200 workers employed. But like many good things, there was a downside. The pressures of staying relevant and trying to rake in a profit. Their ultimate solution? Crunch time! No sooner was the crew finished with one game, then they had to start work on another. And sometimes it had to go through endless amounts of rewrites, recasts, and tons of last-minute changes mere days before a game was ready to ship out. With the decline in profits, they felt they had no choice but to try and shell out as many games as possible. After all, while they had great sponsors, that didn't mean much unless they could produce a finished quality product, using the term quality loosely. It didn't help that they had a heavy reliance on the Telltale tool, their main engine for their titles since the very beginning. While it was super reliable in the early years, the glitches really started to show, and while they did eventually shift things up with the engine, it was too little too late from here on out. Probably the worst part of Telltale's fast-paced production was the effects it had on its workers. Most of them had to take on extremely long hours during the week, and there was always the looming threat of being demoted or laid off. Overall, it became a toxic and miserable work environment where even newer faces excited to work in the video gaming industry instantly cracked under pressure.
Unhappy, unhappy,
Along the way, a good chunk of them were let go, and a select few, including some of the more higher-ups, just jumped ship to look for better opportunities. Those that remained, as cryptic as it sounds, their suffering would end sooner than they thought. In late 2018, it finally happened. The last major investors for Telltale pulled their funding, and Telltale had to declare bankruptcy while they were in the middle of producing The Walking Dead, the final season.
Woof. The weight that title holds could crush concrete.
With the company's closure, they had to turn over production of the last 2 episodes of the game to Skybound Games, a division of the same company that produced the original Walking Dead comics. With the final episode's release in March of 2019, the plug was finally pulled. The era of Telltale Games had come to an end.
There have been rumblings in the town council trying to ban it within city limits.
But gum's the only thing that helps me concentrate.
When you really look at it, Telltale's history is kind of tragic. In the beginning, all they really wanted was a chance to prove what others usually overlook, being able to tell an enticing narrative through interactive gameplay. But as time went on, the stress of success started to eat away at them until it was less about making a difference and more about staying alive until the weight from their unfair standards ultimately crushed them.
Though in a weird way, this tale actually gives us a moral that anyone can follow. Don't try to be perfect. Allow yourself to take breaks, hiatuses if you need to. Because if you try super hard to remain relevant at every point, you're gonna crash. Hard and fast.
While this company's story doesn't have a happy ending, it still left behind a massive legacy. For over a decade, Telltale brought into the world more than a handful of funny, intense, and emotional stories. Some better than others, but a majority still had plenty of heart in them. More importantly, it kept the adventure gaming genre alive and thriving, inspiring more great titles such as Firewatch, Until Dawn, and the Life is Strange series, and more indie companies wanting to strut their stuff and show what they can contribute to the industry. So, for better or worse, we must never forget about the company that had so many tales to tell.
I'm the Fiery Joker, and I think it's time we saluted Telltale Games the right way. With a meme.
Banang, banang, banang.
Bye-bye!
Kaboom!
Point and click adventure games.
You gotta be kidding.